If you've spent 500, 1,000, or even 1,500 hours consuming content in your target language, but still feel like a fish out of water when you try to actually speak, the answer is not simply to practice speaking more. You need to follow the one rule that I share in this video. But before I share that rule, I need to explain why, even after months or years of immersion, people still feel like they can't speak. Because only in understanding the why can we understand the best way to fix it. And to be clear, I'm not talking about people who say they can't speak and mean that they can't speak perfectly. I'm talking about people who, after years of immersion, still find themselves in situations where they try to answer a basic question someone asks them, make small talk, or explain a seemingly simple idea and realize they don't have the words that they need. While languages are made up of tens or even hundreds of thousands of words in total, the 1,000 or 2,000 most frequently used words make up the overwhelming majority of vocabulary that we actually interact with on a daily basis. Everything from fantasy books, action movies, crime dramas, podcasts, product reviews, recipes, nature documentaries, and daily conversation shares a core set of a couple thousand vocabulary words. What differentiates these domains is the set of domain-specific vocabulary above that core couple thousand. So while comic books and infomercials are both going to use the words put, to, and free, you're probably more likely to hear spill, mop, and payments in an infomercial than in a comic book. As we consume content in our target language and see how people use words and grammar structures in different contexts, our brains start to develop a mental model of our target language. We gradually build a scaffolding in our brain that assimilates new vocabulary words and grammar structures, and we gradually develop a clearer and clearer picture of how speakers of that language express certain ideas. The more content that we consume, the stronger that mental model becomes. Essentially, we develop an intuitive understanding of how the language works to the point where it feels weird to imagine a time that we didn't know it. And it is the sufficient development of our mental model that allows for the emergence of genuine speaking ability, where we are able to put our thoughts into our target language and communicate them to others naturally. Here's where it gets tricky, and this is why so many people feel like they still can't speak despite hundreds or even thousands of hours of immersion. We may need to come into contact with a word or grammar structure dozens or even hundreds of times before we fully acquire it. And so naturally, we tend to acquire more frequently used words earlier in our language learning journey. As discussed above, basically all domains share the same core set of vocabulary, and once we have fully acquired those couple thousand words, we will be able to speak generally and get our point across about almost any topic. However, there will still be tens of thousands of domain and situation-specific words that we haven't yet acquired because we haven't come into contact with them enough times to. And there's not really a way to guess at these because our languages are not always logical or consistent. And this knowledge gap, where you have a strong mental model of the language but lack domain or situation-specific vocabulary, is when you will most acutely feel like you are a fish out of water when you try to actually speak in your target language. Because even if you're able to generally get your point across, you will get into a conversation and suddenly feel like your speaking ability drops to zero. For example, someone who has spent a lot of time watching TV shows in English and who speaks pretty well, but who has never watched basketball in English, will definitely have learned the words throw and shoot in certain contexts. And while it would be totally reasonable, based on the definition of the word throw, to assume that English speakers throw a basketball, for some reason we shoot it. And were that person to find themselves in a conversation about basketball, they might talk about how a player was great because they made so many throws, and be met with bewilderment from whoever they were talking with. And then, of course, they would go on Reddit later that night and vent about how they've been consuming content for years, but still can't even talk about a simple kids game. And that's just one example. There are so many conversations that we have fairly regularly in real life that don't actually come up that often in input unless you specifically seek it out. You can consume thousands of hours of TV shows without ever seeing someone talk about their favorite movie and why they like it so much, or explain what they think should be done about climate change, or describe how to change a tire. And no matter how good your language abilities are, if you find yourself in any of those situations, you still might have trouble communicating as well as you'd like. And that brings us to the one rule that you need to follow if you've spent a lot of time consuming content but still feel like you can't speak. If you want to be able to talk about something eloquently and with precision, you need to spend lots of time consuming content where other people talk about that specific thing. If you want to be able to talk about gardening, you need to consume lots of content where people talk about gardening. If you want to be able to talk about your favorite movies and why you like them so much, you need to consume lots of content where other people talk about their favorite movies and why they like them so much. And if you want to be able to make small talk or casually joke around, you need to consume lots of content where other people make small talk and casually joke around. Now look, the unfortunate reality is that it's simply not realistic for many language learners to do that with every single domain. There just isn't enough time. While I would absolutely love to be able to get my Spanish to the same level as my English, the reality is that my English is as good as it is because I've consumed probably over 100,000 hours of it, and that's including decades of schooling on a wide variety of subjects that I never even think about anymore, and relationships and hundreds of books and so much more. Language learners need to make peace with the fact that there will be gaps in our knowledge, and there will be topics that we will only be able to talk about generally. But for the topics that we do care about, and that we do want to be able to talk about with precision and with accuracy and with eloquence, we need to get lots and lots of targeted input.